Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us virtually for our Commercialization and Entrepreneurship Speaker Series. I'm Laurie Achtman with the Penn Center for Innovation, and just thank you for being willing to spend some time with us virtually. We're the commercialization organization here at Penn. And today, I'm really pleased that we could host my colleague, Michael Poisel, who's the executive director at PCI Ventures, which is our venture creation arm. Michael's going to introduce his background more specifically, but I just wanted to add, Michael brings really unique and great experience from both the venture side and leading venture creation here at Penn for very early stage ideas, working with both faculty and students, and whether or not you're at Penn or external to Penn, he just brings a lot of great advice. And the way I generally like to run these sessions is we'll let Michael present, and then I'll moderate a Q&A towards the end. Please feel free to use the chat feature to ask questions, and then I can kind of pose them in order. And just thank you again for being here, and I'll hand it off to Michael, and thanks to my colleague Jessica for coordinating all of this. And we are recording the session, just so everyone knows.
Thank you, Lori, and thank you to everybody for being here today. Hopefully everyone is staying safe and healthy through this ordeal. I wanted to have a chance today to talk to everybody about how we create companies at Penn, and give everyone else an insight as to what we do here, and have a chance to ask questions as well. I'll try to make sure that I don't take all the time speaking, and so that we have time for a conversation afterwards. If you have a specific question while I'm giving my talk, it's perfectly fine to send in a chat question during it. I'll try to check in with those, but otherwise we'll have Q&A at the end that Lori will moderate. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started. As Lori said, she gave a little bit of my background. I've been in the venture world, company startup world, for over 20 years now. I had my master's degree in MBA from Penn and went into venture capital for 10 years, GE, Apex, and New Spring, most of my time being spent at New Spring Capital here locally in Philadelphia, and then moved over to Penn with the idea of helping the university create an entrepreneurial mindset and culture, and really a process by which our faculty and staff could create companies here at Penn. When I came, we really didn't have a good understanding of how we could do that within the policies and rules of the university. And so that's where we are today, and I'll go through that in more detail. Our mission and goal is to promote entrepreneurship and incubate early stage technologies here at the university, helping them get towards a commercial success. The real idea and purpose is to provide that gap support that an idea and research needs to get from the lab to something commercial. And we see that as an opportunity to benefit society, Philadelphia, the university, and our faculty as well. Really something that can benefit everyone in helping this technology get from A to B. If you think about the way the government programs work today, there's a huge amount of money spent on basic research, and there's a small program for companies called SBIR, Small Business Innovative Research Grants. There really isn't anything in between, so you have to really have a company in order to get that second level of funding. And we want to try to help our faculty and staff to be able to figure out how do they do that. So how do they access that money, and how do we get to that point, as well as then to take this whole process further and actually build companies. What I wanted to start with today, though, is to talk about specific to Penn. In creating this model and idea of how we do this, we wanted to make sure that we created something that operates inside the rules of the university. So making sure that we created a program that maximized the opportunity without moving against the policies that were already in place. And so I wanted to talk about that. At Penn specifically, and we're a little bit different than some of the other universities, At the time of negotiating an agreement with Penn, a spin-out company can't be majority owned by Penn employees and their family. That's to prevent sort of Penn negotiating with Penn. We don't want that Penn to be on both sides of an equation. So we want to make sure that the companies are minority owned at that point. And unlike other major research universities, virtually all of them in Boston, San Francisco, everywhere, here at Penn, companies can sponsor research back into the lab from which they were generated. So our faculty can create a company, and that company can sponsor research back into their lab, provided that they meet the minority ownership criteria and all of the other rules and policies of the university. And that's very important to us. It sets us apart as a university and provides additional capital to do applied research on some of these nascent early stage technologies. So with that in mind, we created 2 programs. And I like to say to people, there are 3 ways to start a company at Penn. You can work with us through Upstart, you can work with us through Up Advisors, or you can go it alone. Working with PCI Ventures is entirely voluntary as a Penn employee. No one has to use the services that we offer, but we want to make sure they're available for the people that do feel that they need them. If someone thinks that they can build a company on their own, they're more than welcome to go and try to do that. So the first program I'll talk about is Upstart, and that's the one that I'll spend most time talking about today because it's our full service model. It's where we get involved early on and really become a partner, sort of a co-founder in the company and helping to build the business and move it forward. Our other program, Up Advisors, is more of a lighter touch model for companies and teams that maybe feel like they have somewhat of a handle on what they need to do, but they still want some of that support. This would be an example, would be a company, let's say, where someone's going to leave Penn to run the company and manage the business. They may not need as much from us because they're going to do it themselves, separating themselves from Penn. And that's fine. We can still help on the sidelines, help them get started, and be a business advisor to them as they build. Another example, maybe a company that is simply going to apply for SBIR grants. Maybe they don't know exactly where they'll go from there, but that's where they want to start, and that's all their vision really includes today. So they'll start with an Up Advisors company, and that's fine too. But we try to help our teams and entrepreneurial teams that come to visit with us about which program works best for them, and we try to fit that to them and find something that can help them accelerate their process quickly. So what I'll do from here is talk about the Upstart model and how it works and what we do. The following slides after this describe our services in more detail, and so I include them here so that if anyone wants a copy of the presentation, they can read through those. But I know this is probably bad PowerPoint form, but I'll probably stay on this slide for a while as it helps to organize our thoughts as we go through the steps of the process. So the first step is the Penn invention. All of our companies that we work on at PCI and PCI Ventures are based around Penn intellectual property. We very often will not tend to work with a company that could be more of a piece of software, something that's not IP, something that's more of a service business, let's say, or maybe something that's consumer driven, such as a Wharton business might be like Warby Parker or something like that. That wouldn't necessarily fit our model. So we're trying to take these inventions and move them forward. And so we work with our licensing team to help us to do that. And they're involved in the process from the very beginning so that we're working together on this commercialization strategy. Certainly, licensing of the technology is still in the plan. It's just a matter of when and to who. And so this is where we start. What happens is that a faculty member will come to us, usually through the licensing officer, and say they're interested in starting a company and would like to learn how. We then walk them through the process. We help them think about what they want to do. And if they decide they want to move forward, then we actually file the registration paperwork for them on their behalf with the state of Delaware. We start Delaware LLCs. They're cheap and easy structures. And for various other reasons that I can get into if people are interested, that's a good structure for us. We start them as LLCs knowing full well that our venture investor partners are going to want to invest in a C Corp. That's okay. When we get to that point, we simply convert the company over to a C Corp. It's an easy process that's completely painless. And so this works for everyone. There's also various tax reasons and company governance issues that lean us towards LLCs, but I won't get into those here. We then, once we filed the paperwork, and even before the paperwork, our services start because we help our faculty and our entrepreneurial teams in naming the companies, which can be a fun part of the process, can be very challenging. You want something that's distinctive, something that's going to be a part of the project all the way along, so you want to make sure that you're happy with what you pick. Some people have ideas in their mind. We had one entrepreneurial team where the founder said that he's known the name of his company for the last 10 years. And he was just waiting for the chance to use it. That's fantastic. Other people haven't given it any thought, and so we have to spend a lot of cycles in working with them to do that. Once we have all that together, we file the paperwork. We then help them with all of their back office legal needs, filing registrations with the government. That includes getting them ready for SBIR grants. We want to get every company ready to apply for an early stage commercialization grant, even if they don't eventually use it. We want to make sure the registrations are there and good to go because they can take 6 to 8 weeks to put in place, and we don't want to have an emergency trying to get that done when someone's filing for a grant. So we do it up front. We then do all the paperwork, the LLC operating agreement, the back office, and then it becomes, we move over from company formation, which is where that step is, to team recruitment. So now kind of box number 3, because for us, it's important that we find an outside person to run the company very early on. So we go out and look for entrepreneurs to run the businesses. I would say this is one of our biggest value adds and something we spend a lot of our time on. Probably as much as 40% of our job is out talking to entrepreneurs, meeting new entrepreneurs, and trying to match the right people to the right projects. Today, over the course of 10 years of building this program, we've developed close to over 1,000 entrepreneurs. But yet we still have openings because it's very important to us that we match the right person to the right project. And we want to get that right. When we get it right, we very often see the company take off. When we get it wrong, the company sputters, and we have to try to think about finding somebody new. It's a very difficult process for us because we are bringing these people on at an extremely early stage to the point that they're almost also a founder in the company. The company at this stage doesn't have any money to fund their salaries, so they have to work for equity. Penn, wants to be very supportive of these companies, but does not have a fund for this ignition capital to order to pay salaries in that. So we hire people in for equity. We set up an agreement with them where they own all of their equity up front, but it reverse vests over time, meaning that they have to complete milestones in order to get to keep the equity. If they don't complete the milestones at the end of the agreement, the equity comes back to the business. And again, there are tax purposes and tax reasons for why we do it that way that I can get into if anybody's interested. Once the entrepreneur is on board, we start to work with them to build out the rest of the business. That includes IP strategy, which their intellectual property strategy of the company may be different than Penn's. And we have our legal law clinic at the law school that helps us with that, with those strategies. We work on a business strategy for the business. So what's the market opportunity? What's the market size? And we have groups at Wharton that help us to do that through the business school. We then help the company with a branding strategy. So what's the look and feel of the business going to be? What's the website going to look like? What's the logo? And our design school has a design practicum every spring that helps with us to be able to do that for the companies as well. Once we have all that together, we kind of have the vision for the business. We then, and through PCI Ventures team, help with the funding strategy. So are we going to apply for grants, go after early stage venture capital, angel money, corporate VCs and corporate partnerships, even charitable foundations in some cases will invest in our companies. So we try to put that together and figure out, okay, what is the best technique and strategy to fund this company. We then make lots of introductions for the companies and work with them on their pitch decks. We bring in a consultant that actually helps them understand the technique of giving a pitch, not just creating a pitch deck. And she's incredibly helpful. She makes a huge amount of impact on the team's ability to present themselves fluidly and professionally to investors. Once we do all that, and it looks like we're going to get the company funded, we go into business development and capital acquisition in steps 4 and 5. And in those steps, we have service provider relationships, our partners, that do all of the other back office things that we haven't set up yet. So that's the payroll, the bookkeeping, insurance, the benefits, everything else that the company is going to need. We give them an attorney early on who tends to allow them to defer their fees. A lot of our vendors defer fees. So there's all very low cash impact to the company prior to getting it actually funded and up and running. Once the company is funded and operating, we get to the last box, number 6, and somebody from our team stays on the board of the company as long as the company wants us to be there. We would certainly leave if anybody wanted us to, and kind of the vision when we started this was that once the company had venture investors, that they would kick us off and we would go and move back to the start of the companies and start the process again. Regrettably, from my team's perspective, we've only been kicked off of 2 boards in 10 years. So you can imagine today, all of my team sits on an incredible number of boards. They don't eat, sleep, or remember the names of their children, but they're focused on their companies and providing service, and that's important to us. So that's kind of an overview of what we do. I'll get to a little bit later on the other remaining piece of the model that was missing for a long time, and that was space for the companies, and I'll get to that to the end of what we do today for that. But that gives you kind of an overview of how we operate. And I'll go down and just show you, these are some of the slides I talked about that gives more detail about the services, from managed team recruitment, web design, addressable market analysis, intellectual property strategies, marketing materials, fundraising strategies, pitch feedback sessions. Just in the last 2 weeks, we had a pitch day with a group of venture capitalists and a pitch day with a group of angels, and did them virtually because of a shutdown, and everything went very well, and all of those discussions are continuing as we speak, which is fantastic. And then also our Up the Odds program, where we help the companies with commercialization grant preparation. That has been an incredibly popular aspect of our services. We put in, our companies with our assistance, put in 30 to 40 SBIRs a year. Our win rate is somewhere around 20 to 25%, which the national average is about 10%, 10, 11%. So we're doing pretty well from that standpoint. And that's a fantastic, and I give so much credit to my team for all of the effort they put in to help the companies understand how to do it. It's somewhat of a game applying for SBIRs. Each agency has their own peculiarities about what they're looking for and how they want the grants presented, the grant applications presented. And with all of our experience, we know that, and we can really tailor each grant application to the agency that they're applying to, and really help them to give them as much advantage as we can in securing the grant. As I mentioned, preferred vendor relationships, our legal document library. So we have legal templates for just about every kind of transaction a company could go through, which is incredibly simple for them. It's something that we've developed over the last 10 years. Some of our documents probably weren't that great early on, but every time we use them with a company and lawyers mark them up, our documents keep getting better. And we've continued to make those changes over time, to the point now that most attorneys don't even mark up our documents very much, because they've been used now over 200 times. So they're pretty solid, and that's a great asset for us to have and for our companies to be able to leverage. Partnership development, we're always working with them to develop additional partnerships. And then our Assistant to the Entrepreneur program, which we just started our new cycle in the last 2 weeks, which matches a Penn student with one of our companies to help them, both sides, for the students to learn from being part of a real company, a real project, to the entrepreneurs getting the help they need to help to build the business. Here's kind of the obligatory slide of logos that you see. I'll give this a little bit of an opportunity for me to talk about some of the examples of companies that we've worked with. Penn Technologies is our autonomous drone company that has done incredibly well. They have raised probably close to 20 million in venture capital. They have gone into the mining industry as their first app, that their killer app for their software and robot technology. They map the interior of mines around the world and have been incredibly successful at being able to do that. And they will continue now to move into other markets as well. Linnaeus is one of our cancer therapeutic companies. They are in phase 1/2 trials on their therapeutic drug, and so far the trial seems to be going very well. So it kind of shows you that our technologies span the horizon of what things go on at Penn. ELS is our education company. They're doing simulations to help train school administrators on how to deal with difficult issues, and that's revenue producing today and doing very well, break even profitable. So as they list above, we have companies from all over the university, from all types of different technologies and research, and helping all of them to grow and build. I'll give one example of a company that we built from beginning all the way to exit. That would be a company that we had a nurse that did research, and she was doing research on readmissions. So readmissions at hospitals are a big challenge and difficulty for them. And she actually found through her research that she could predict which patients were going to come back, were going to be readmitted within the 30-day window that everybody pays attention to. And it was one of these amazing aha moments, and she developed a questionnaire that she would give to patients, and based on their answers, she could say, I can tell this patient's going to come back. So she came to us. We took that questionnaire, turned it into an algorithm, which became a software app that we put on an iPad, and built the company. We brought in an entrepreneur who was actually someone who was a former student of hers, and built the team who then installed it back at HUP in our hospital system. Through the use of her questionnaire and signaling who are the high-risk patients to come back, readmissions at Penn's hospital system dropped by 20 to 30% within only a couple months. So it definitely had an immediate impact. We then took that solution, started selling it to other hospitals, got up to anywhere from, 10 to 15 hospital systems that bought the software and sold the company to Cardinal Healthcare. So that's an example where it goes from somebody having an idea, kind of an aha at Penn, and building the company through the process to the point that we can take it to an exit all the way to the other side of it. Not all of our companies are going to be that successful and have that kind of an easy path. Nothing is easy, but a straightforward path from beginning to end. But we're here to help and to try to make that whole process easier. We can't make it easy, but can we make it easier, reduce the friction that these companies have in getting to a product to market? And at the end, if we have more time, I can give other examples. One thing I will also add to this is that we don't judge the ideas on the front end. So a lot of people ask us, how do you pick who gets to be in the Upstart program? And I would say that we don't pick. I tell my team, none of us should have the hubris to believe that we can tell on the front end whether this is an idea that will make it or not. And for us to try to judge them or judge the idea is really kind of silly. What we do instead is depend on the market to do that. So everything in our model is based around market diligence and market information, so that we have an idea of what does the market think of this technology. So we'll start a company very early on, even if it's just an idea, and immediately push that idea out to the marketplace. There's no stealth mode here. It's about talking to market leaders, corporate partners, anybody else that we can talk to, venture investors, getting everybody's opinion on the idea. Very often those opinions tend to push us towards pivots and moving in different directions. And in some cases, it can lead us to actually shutting the whole process down to say, you know what, this is an interesting idea, but the market's not interested. And in that case, it's just not going to be something commercial. It's a tough information to receive, but we'd rather learn that early on and fail fast if we're going to fail than to have something drag on and on, hoping and thinking that something's going to change when it just isn't. As I mentioned, we have companies in all different areas. This chart gives you an idea, because Penn is focused on life sciences. you'll see that as much as 75% of what we do is in the life sciences realm, and that includes therapeutics, devices, diagnostics, and digital health. The rest of the idea is going to fall in these other buckets around the university. So just to talk about the impact of what we've done, we've started over 200 companies. We're probably up around 220, 225 at this point. We've been doing this for the last 10 years, and the program's been in existence. We have about 65 companies active in the portfolio. That shows you that certainly we have attrition. We're going to lose companies along the way, and that's okay. This is about trying to take ideas forward and trying to get additional research behind the ideas, and certainly, not all of them are going to make it, but we hope many of them do. Our companies have been very successful at raising money. They've raised over 200 million, with actually a lot of that coming in the last couple of years as the venture market has really opened up, which has been fantastic. But that includes everything, not just venture. It's angels, it's SBIR grants, it's TTR grants, corporations, and everybody else. So it's a great example of what our companies have been able to do. Beyond that, not just talking about quantitative impacts, but also qualitative in the impact we have on Philadelphia in providing technical jobs to the Philadelphia area, and also providing a path for Penn graduates to stay in Philadelphia. And many of these graduates may have thought that their only path in life was an academic career. We can show them that there's a path for an entrepreneurial career as well, and get them into one of these companies. And more importantly for me, keep them here in Philadelphia, so that we build more of an asset base here and an intelligence base here in the city. We have 7 companies producing revenue today. We've had 5 exits. Those exits have returned back to Penn, so we don't have a fund, but when you look at the cost of the program over the last 10 years, we've returned back to Penn over 9 times that cost. So it's just been a great financial return to the university to pursue a strategy like this and to invest in our team. I will say I'm very happy with the support that Penn gives us. We're one of the largest venture teams of any major university, and that's really exciting. Additionally, we've returned quite a bit of money back to Penn in terms of research dollars, which is exciting as well for the companies. So I mentioned before, talking about the challenge of not having space for the companies when they reach that point of getting funded. And so it's about 4.5 years ago now, we opened the Penn Center. This was an opportunity to take advantage of a plot of land that Penn had purchased just south of campus. So we're on the other side of the Schuylkill River, but to the south, rather than thinking east or west, as most people do with the Schuylkill. We're to the south of campus on 23 acres that Penn purchased, and really without an idea exactly of what they were going to do with it, but taking advantage of the fact that it was so close to campus. We then worked with them to build the incubator that is today the Penn Center, that houses over 50 companies, is completely full in terms of its private space. We have a waiting list of companies that want to get in, which is really exciting. That has led us to the idea of expanding the concept throughout the campus. So the Pennovation Works campus, as you see here, just along Grace Ferry Avenue and 34th Street, now comprises multiple companies that we can reconfigure and renovate for the purposes of small companies using them. So after the Pennovation Center was our first building, our second building was to the front of the property, and that's an office building that we've had companies be able to move into, most notably Ghost Robotics, one of our companies, probably at this point has leased maybe as much as a quarter of the building themselves as they continue to grow rapidly. Received another contract this week, very exciting for them as they grow. And another one of our companies, Chip Diagnostics, has also taken significant space in the building. So that building is pretty much full now. So the Pennovation Center is full. The front office building is full. And as we saw this happening, we talked to the university and said, we really need more lab space. We have so many life sciences companies. This is a big need among Penn companies, but also a big need locally in Philadelphia. And so they commissioned what will now be our next project, which will be coming in the fall of 2020, and that will be a fully enabled lab building, which is a really exciting addition to the campus and is under construction now as we speak. that'll be such a great growth space. So we look at it as our companies growing inside the Pennovation Center and growing up and graduating into the main lab building, and then continue to progress in their business models from there. It's our hope, actually, we've already started thinking about, where do we go from here? And one idea is actually greenfielding another building, a fourth building, for these companies then to go from the main lab building into more permanent space and building off to the side of the property. So we continue to grow this vision and having the whole campus involved. I hope that's another message that comes through from Wharton, the law school, the design school, to all of the research labs. There's so much of the campus that's involved in this effort of trying to help entrepreneurial companies get there and grow and be successful. So with that, I'll wrap up and leave about 20 minutes for questions. My contact information on the screen if anybody's interested. And there's certainly other stories that I could go into and other examples I could give, but I want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to ask questions as well. If we run out of questions, I can talk about some of the other businesses that are in the portfolio.
Thank you so much, Michael. And I see we have one question that's popped up. Before we go to that, I just thought maybe you could give a quick overview of what you're seeing in the venture space with COVID-19 here, and then we'll go as the first question, and then we'll proceed from there.
Yeah, that's a great question, Lori. The last couple of years have really been a golden age for Penn. Even outside of, if you include our portfolio as well as companies that started on their own at Penn, we've raised probably at this point over $500 million in venture capital. It's been a magical, incredible time for our technologies and very exciting because we've had such incredible research that needs this opportunity to get to the market. How that's affected by where we are today remains to be seen, but initial indications are right now, I think a lot because of the uncertainty that nobody knows how long this is going to last. We've seen a very, very chilling effect in terms of funding from venture capitalists. We have some opportunities where venture capitalists are willing to fund projects specifically related to COVID-19 research, which is great. But overall, the deals that we've had in process have pretty much come to a stop. And so that's a really frustrating challenge for our companies. And we're focused right now on helping them to apply for government assistance so that they can ride this storm out until the markets open up again and we have other opportunity. I think we're hoping that this is something that we get past quickly and things open up again. Venture capitalists have funds, right? The process isn't immediate for them. They raise a 10-year pool of capital that they're going to invest from, that they typically invest from over 5 years and then ride out the other 5 years. And so that money's still out there. The concern with the investors today is since they don't know how long this is going to last, they want to hold on to their dry powder. And that's really what they're thinking. So if we get more clarity on what the world is going to look like post-COVID, then we see these funds opening back up again and we'll be able to get more investment. That's not a lot of solace for the companies that need money today, but we are hoping that this will work its way through.
Okay, great. Thanks, Michael. So we have definitely a bunch of questions now in the chat. The first one is, sorry, I'm scrolling up. For life sciences space, what is your definition of fully equipped lab space?
So in the Pennovation Center, we offer a full service model of anywhere from deionized water, glass cleaning, sub freezers, a dark room, virtually anything a small business would need. We have those services provided for in the Pennovation Center as joint free equipment that people can use and leverage as part of the business. What that allows is that small companies that maybe just have an SBIR grant, they can rent one bench. And I think today we might have maybe a couple of benches open at the current moment. I'm not sure. But you could rent one bench. You only need a small piece of real estate because you've got so many of the joint services that you can use as well. When it comes to our graduation space, our lab building, that is going to be a fit out your own lab kind of a space. So we'll be providing the shell of the lab that you need, but some of the other things will have to be brought in on your own. And so that's kind of the difference is that we expect, a small company could never afford to do this, but a more established business is going to be able to provide that for themselves. And they're actually going to want to be able to do that and build out their own lab. So we're actually having discussions now. Our marketing materials are ready to go for renting out the lab building, and we're having conversations with people about fitting out their labs as we speak. And so, we're welcome to have those discussions now before the building is ready to go, because we want companies to have time to get their own designer in there, talk about how it's going to look and feel, and start getting that construction done probably 60 days prior to the building being ready.
Okay, great, thanks. And I'll just add, PCI is going to be very involved in helping to market this space, so you can follow PCI or PCI Ventures to learn a lot more. The next question is, if I would like to start a company, how can I get access to Penn Technologies, and how do you pick the entrepreneur? That's a great question.
Yes, and so there is some access on our website, on PCI's website, to look at available technologies. I would encourage you to look there, but also, because no list could be comprehensive in a university this large, to reach out to one of us and we can direct you to a licensing officer to make sure that we find your interest area and match you to the licensing officer that covers that area, so that they can discuss with you ideas that you have, what you're looking for, and then what's available. And they'll have those discussions to be able to help do that. And that would be great. We're willing to help facilitate those processes. Our services at PCI Ventures are only open to Penn employees and Penn projects, but anything, we want to make sure that if something isn't being pursued through one of our companies, that there's still licensing opportunities, and support our licensing team and to have those discussions. In terms of the entrepreneurs and how we pick them, we bring in people, we interview them, and talk about who they are and who they want to be, what they want to do going forward. There's a couple of factors that are really important to us, much more so than whether you've been an entrepreneur before. Because of all of the services we offer, we can provide opportunities for people who haven't been a CEO before. And since we can only offer equity up front, we think that's also a nice benefit, is that you get to be a CEO. It's tough to crack that ceiling. And so you come in and work with us. Even if the company doesn't make it, somebody asks you at an interview, what have you been doing for the last 6 months to a year? You can say, oh, I was CEO of a spin out for the University of Pennsylvania. Now that makes you an entrepreneur, a risk taker, a leader. It really can add to a resume. And so we think that's a popular sell point. But having said that, that's the kind of people we want to find for entrepreneurs. We want to find people that know how to lead. We want to find people that know how to manage a project. So, can you manage a project from point A to point B? I'm an engineer. Gantt charts are my love, right? You should know how to build one and how they operate, and be able to work to that kind of a mindset of structure of, I'm going to go from here to there. Here are the steps. Here's how much time and here's how much funding it's going to take to get from the beginning to the end. That kind of process driven. It also takes somebody, not just a leader, but somebody who understands the challenge of building a business and is willing to step up and provide that level of enthusiasm, commitment, and drive. Someone who's willing to, when they have to, run around like their hair's on fire, right? Because sometimes that's what it takes, that kind of mentality, in order to get through some of the challenges, because none of this is easy. And we want to make sure we find people that are fully committed and understand what they're getting themselves into.
Okay, great. The next question is, what is the preferred method to look into and be considered for the team building part of the process? Kind of, I think, a similar question to the one above, to the one you just answered.
Similar question. Yes.
Okay. The next question is, how early stage, this is a great question, can someone come to you with an idea? Concept only, prototype, proof of concept through studies? Also, what type of IT protection is supported?
Yes. So we get all stages of companies. We get absolutely raw ideas, sketches on a napkin. You know, many of our companies that we've started are very, very early, and that's okay. We would love to have those conversations now. I would tell you, you know, we would never tell somebody unless their idea wasn't based around Penn, it was based somewhere else. But if they have an idea based on something going on at Penn, we're not going to tell somebody no in terms of starting a company. We might say not yet. We might say, you know what, this is a really early idea. Let's do some more work in the lab to try to get it ready to give it the best shot that it has. But we'd love to have those conversations as soon as you're ready and talk about what the opportunities are. Sometimes, you know, an SBIR is an option at that stage. I will tell you that the National Science Foundation loves crazy ideas, right? That's their thing. They want something that's far out there. They don't want an incremental technology, an incremental idea. They want you to shoot for the stars. So if you've got an early stage idea, it might be exactly what they're looking for. And we could get you an SBIR, get some applied research dollars behind the concept, help you to build a prototype if that's the next stage, and really move that forward. So sometimes that's the right time is to start it when it's very early. Sometimes it's still time to wait and do some more clinical research or some research in the lab or find another way to build a prototype before we get started on the company.
Great. Thank you. This is related to the Pennovation Center. With it being fully booked and continuously growing companies, how do you ensure a new company being granted space has the proper physical room to grow while in the center? And well, you know, you can talk about the whole committee and how that's managed, I guess.
It's a great question. It absolutely is, and something that we definitely struggle with. We want to be supportive of the companies that are in the building and provide them with the resources they need to grow. But as we move along and the company continues to be very full, it is something that we've had to consider, and that's, you know, do we need to start telling companies it's time to go? Certainly, when some of our companies come to us and say they want, you know, a fourth space or a fifth space inside the building, we need to have those tough conversations with them to say, you know what, I think you're about as big as we can handle. Let's try to think about an alternative strategy. But up until this point, until we get the lab building online, which we're pretty much there now because companies can start planning their space there already, up until this point, it's really been hard for us to kick companies out because in many cases there wasn't a lot of good options of where they were going to go. And certainly I didn't want to be in our curation committee. It's a committee of people that has these conversations. We didn't want to be in a position of telling a company they have to leave the building and that precipitating them leaving Philadelphia or leaving the state. That's the last thing we want to do. And we don't want to put a nascent company on the verge of greatness in a difficult position by telling them, you know, we're out of space for them. So it really has been, it's been a tough knife's edge for us of trying to be supportive while also making sure that we have space for companies coming in. I will tell you that we actually expect over the next 6 to 9 months that with the new building coming online and some of our other very successful companies moving out, we should have a much more easier space allocation in the Pennovation Center. So we're hoping in 6 to 9 months from now, we're going to have a much easier time being able to fit companies in because we've got 2 or 3 companies that are doing extremely well, and will probably either move over to the lab building or may just move out into a building of their own because they're doing well, and that's great.
Great, thank you. The next question is related to B Corps. Is there an easy transition between an LLC and a B Corp, and what percentage of our companies are currently registered B Corp?
Yeah, the B Corp idea is something that we've talked about and I've introduced to a lot of entrepreneurs. I think it's an attractive option for companies. Just to back up for a second, for people that may not know what a B Corp is, a B Corp is a company that is a for-profit entity but has a social mission. And that can be important in a couple ways, certainly from a marketing standpoint, like Ben and Jerry's, who is one of the first B Corps, and they say that 5% of their profits go to charity, that sort of a thing. But it's also an important distinction in how the company is run, because a company that's a B Corp can make decisions based on social good and not just on profit. So a C Corp, Delaware, C Corp, they need to make decisions based on profit. Their investors have invested in them to make money. So the example I always use is, let's say a car company has a car plant in Harrisburg, and they decide that it makes economical sense to move the plant to Mexico. As a company, that's what they have to do. They need to be looking for what is the cheapest alternative for them to make money because they're a C Corp. A B Corp, the board can actually say, sure, that makes a lot of sense to do that, but we're not going to do it because it would decimate the town. And so we're going to keep the company here. And so B Corps allow you that kind of flexibility. Unfortunately, within our program, we have yet to have any companies choose that option. We've brought it up. We've talked to companies about that. I kind of try to talk to them about three alternatives. There's the for-profit LLC C Corp model. There's the B Corp, which is the in-between, and there's the nonprofit. We have teams that come in and say they want to start a nonprofit, and I try to these days maybe lean them a little bit away from that and say you should think about a B Corp. So we've been able to coach some of the student teams, especially the President's Prize winners, in that regard, and some of them have gone the B Corp route. But within our portfolio, we haven't had any choose that. I'm still looking for the right opportunity to be able to do that because I do think it's an interesting and attractive option for businesses.
Okay, great. So the next person says, this is a very informative talk, so thank you. And also, the question is, this person has some friends who started their own companies. They told me it's easy to start a company, but sometimes pretty difficult to close a company. This is very interesting. There are a lot of liabilities and paperwork, tax transfer ownership involved with closing. So the question is, how does PCI Ventures assist with that? How are responsibilities and costs shared among PCI Ventures and owners? And I've actually never heard you talk about this, so I'm really interested to hear about it as well. Thanks.
Yeah, I have to say it's not something I highlight in my pitch, but it
Right.
is sadly something that we have a great deal of experience with. So we have as much as we have a process of how you start a company, and it's interesting because my team has been working on our company creation manual that we have this week, and it's exceedingly detailed, and every minute step that we go through is documented. Every down to every signature, every line is documented. How we start a company. We have the same thing on how do we end a company. We have that same detailed process because we don't want to miss a step. We don't want to screw something up. We don't want to create liability. We don't want to miss tax payments that have to be made. And so we do help all the way through that process. In a lot of cases, we try to make sure that we see it coming. And if we think this is going to happen, then we try to put the brakes on any kind of spending so that we keep a certain amount of money in there so that we can pay an accountant, if necessary, an attorney to help us to wind down the business. And so we do that process. Filing the paperwork with the state of Delaware isn't that hard. And I'm sure that's not what the question refers to. It's everything else of making sure that you've captured things. And then it's not just, so you wind down the company and you pay for everything and you end the year. You still want to have some money left over because there can be things that pop up after that. And so you try to even keep some money there that maybe stays in the business a whole nother year just in case. Because that's really the biggest thing I would say to pay attention to when winding down a company is to try to reserve some cash so that you can hire advisors to be able to do this. Our accountants, Stefano Slack, I'll give a plug for them, are amazing and do a great job in helping us to do that. And then our law firms that we work with, Pepper Hamilton and Morgan Lewis, are also been very good at helping us to wind down businesses when that's necessary. Now, I will say, I will add this just as an addendum to the discussion. If you have an LLC with the state of Delaware and you don't have any liabilities, it's maybe the business never took off, and you decide I don't want that business anymore. In the state of Delaware, they actually understand, and so you can just let a business fade away if that's what you want to do. So let's say you start a company that doesn't go anywhere. The next year or a couple of years later, you get that tax bill, that registration fee from Delaware, and you're like, oh, I don't want to pay this. The business didn't go anywhere. You don't have to. You let it go. The state of Delaware will follow up with you for 3 years. They will continue to ask and say, hey, we didn't get your payment last year. You would owe penalties and fees, and they'll do that again in the year after that. After 3 tries, they give up and they let it go and they dissolve the business internally. So there is the kind of unprofessional kind of just walk away from something that you can do and the business will dissolve on its own. I say that because some people get that bill for a business they thought they were going to start and they never did, and they're like, oh, I got to pay this. No, you don't. You just let the business fade.
Okay, and I think we have time for one last question. Can you talk about the equity share of Penn versus the founder? And I'll also just highlight Michael's contact information is on the screen. So if you have a question we didn't get to, I'm sure you can follow up with him, and him or someone on his team can follow up with you.
Yes. So because of the requirement at Penn that the companies are minority owned, we start our faculty out at 51%. So they actually are in control in the beginning. And we think that's important so they feel like they're in control of picking the entrepreneur, picking the name of the business. So it's their decisions. They control it. But then we're going to bring an entrepreneur on board that's going to bring them below 50%. And bringing that entrepreneur on board, that's we're very quickly starting to negotiate with Penn. So we want that entrepreneur to be negotiating an option, which is going to lead to a license. So at that point, we need the founders to be below 50 so that we're within the rules of the patent policy and the university. And those are rules for the university. They're not Upstart rules. They're not anything PCI created or have anything to do with or any control over. That's the university. And so these programs have to be made to fit within that policy. I will say that we will have an announcement at some point that COVID, I think, is delaying for all of us, where we're going to try to do more at Penn to keep our faculty as close to that 50% line as we can. And when we're able to make the announcement, we'll talk about how we're going to do that. So that we want to maximize the opportunity for our faculty within the rules and doing everything we can to help them to do that and to make starting a company as attractive as we possibly can. We think no matter what, starting a company is an attractive option because a faculty member through a license will get 30% of the proceeds of cash proceeds from the license. And so starting a company means you could get some proceeds from the equity if you sell a company, as well as the 30% proceeds from the license. So we do think that starting a company is an attractive option for faculty, even within the university mandates of how we do that. And the last point I'll make to anybody at Penn, if you're deciding to start a company, we would love to be there for you and support you. We would love to have conversations with you, talk about your ideas and plans, and help you to do that. If you choose to build a company on your own, that's fine. We want to make sure that you know that the PCI team, all of us together, and PCI Ventures is there for you no matter what. So if you decide you want to build a company on your own, that's okay. If you have a question, still come back to us and ask us a question. If you have a document, an agreement that somebody wants you to sign and you're not sure you understand it or you're just not sure you want to sign it, come to us and ask the question. We don't want you to ever feel like you're on your own or you're alone, and we don't want you to sign something that you shouldn't sign or didn't understand when you signed it. So we're there for you. We can help you to find outside professional advisors to help you, and always know that PCI is there to help.